DJ LeRoy.
Nightwatchman, how you doing, buddy?
I'm well. How are you?
Good, good. So you know what, Nightwatchman? I got a little surprise for you, man.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Why you start? You're not going to be bringing heat this evening, are you?
No. We're just going to keep it popping. That's all.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm thinking that I want to actually introduce you to who I call the nightlife mayor, and that can only be live from the Republic of the BK. My mayor, Eric Adams. Bring him up, man. Come on.
Yes, welcome, Mr. Mayor.
Good to see both of you. You know, and I should have the term night watchman also. You know, I did midnights for about 10, 12 years.
Wow.
That was like my favorite tour.
There's something about the city at night. I mean, New York is one of the only really night cities in the world. You know, where things are still going on. There's a whole economy. There's a whole rhythm that happens at night. So I love it.
And that's so important because people don't realize revitalizing our nightlife is crucial to our economic development. When I go and stop at one of these establishments late at night and stop in the kitchen and talk to the chefs, talk to the dishwashers, the bus boys, the girls, the waiters, and really call people to patronize these businesses because low-wage employees are in many of these businesses. And if we don't have it thriving and popping, it really would impact our economy. And so you can't be a mayor that's a 9-to-5 mayor. You have to understand that there's people who work mornings, afternoons, and overnights. And I need to be able to communicate with all of them and say, I see you, I support you, and I need to create an environment where you can do your thing as well.
Absolutely. And Mr. Mayor, I got to give you some proppies, some serious proppies. Why? We talking about the lowest unemployment rate for African Americans, 7.9 since 2019, baby. Yes. Bravo.
Yes. We know we have more to do. But we've witnessed over my time in office a 24% decrease in unemployment around African Americans. We knew we had to be precision on how we did it. Because what we found historically, we asked people to come to us to find out about employment. You may not have a Metro card to come to you. So we said, let's go on the ground. And that's what we did. We started doing hiring halls in the community, Brownsville, Harlem, Bronx, Staten Island, and people started to come. If you build it, they will come. We build it, and now people are coming and realizing that there's employment out there for them.
Absolutely. And Night Watchman, what you got for the mayor, man?
Well, okay, so we kind of remember there's a show that probably slightly before our times that used to start out saying, there's 8 million stories in the naked city. And there's 8 million stories, but there's also 8 million agendas, 8 million opinions, and a bunch of different special interest groups that, you know, you have nonprofits that have budgets the size of small countries, you have unions, you have real estate. So how do you manage all those expectations? Because everybody feels their agenda should be the first one. So how do you approach that?
I love that. But first of all, I got to push back on you a little when you said there are 8 million stories. No, there are 8.3 million people, but there are 35 million opinions. You
Absolutely true.
And one must fully understand that you will never really satisfy everyone. So you have to have what are the core values? What are the core items that are important that you need to focus on? And that is what I built my entire administration about. People want to be safe. They want to be able to have their children properly educated, and they want to be able to house themselves. And I wrap everything around that. And if you stay there, even if you have some misunderstandings on those complicated things, at least people can be able to talk about those things in a safe place, in a place that they can live, and they know their babies are being prepared for the future.
Absolutely. And Mr. Mayor, you know what? At first, I was not going to give you some props because I was coming home one evening, right? And so I noticed on my block, right there on the Community Board 9, like, yo, what are these containers, man? Where's my parking spaces? Yo, what's up? What's up? However, and I also, because I think I mentioned that my son works in your administration, for Deputy Mayor Mira Joshi, right?
Yes,
So I
yes.
called him. I said, "Yo, James, what's up, man? How you do this to me?" He said, "Dad, take a step back, and these are for rat mitigation." I said,
Right.
"Come on, what?" And true, I had seen a number of rats right here. Okay, as a
Mhm.
matter of fact, I'm adjacent. I have a street that divides me from your first deputy mayor. So yes, rats are a real thing here in Community Board 9. But major props with the containerization program. No rats. No, my
Mm.
wife, who was the first to see rats, she's saying hallelujah. So
Okay, so they're not all gone yet, but there's no question that it's had a great impact. I'm down the block from a school where those containers were set up, and I can tell you, before the containers, it was just a mound of garbage, and it was like rat heaven. And
Mm.
so it definitely makes a difference. And so, we tip our
yeah,
hat to you.
yes,
And and,
indeed.
and we did a real analysis of the rodent problem. I hired a rat czar. Commissioner Tish was focused. Everyone tried to containerize our garbage because, believe it or not, when you go across the globe in every modern city and you talk about plastic bags, they say, "Plastic what? What are y'all talking about?" And so we had a real mission. And brothers, they told me it was going to take 5 years. We had a fancy study done. They said you can do it in 5 years. And I said, like hell we are. We're going to do
Mm.
it in 2.5 years. And we rolled out an aggressive plan because when you set a goal and a timeline, people fight to meet that goal in the timeline. We can't be just esoteric and say, well, let's hope ideally we can do something. No. So we started out with our food industries, this local stores, restaurant. Then we moved to chain stores. We're gonna be moving to buildings, and then we're gonna get a cheap container for small houses so that they can use them also. We're going to transform this city. It's going to deal with our rodent issue, and it's going to make a cleaner city. Because, nothing could traumatize your day in life more than your interaction with a rat. If you all of a sudden,
Yes.
if you pull up your toilet seat and a rat pops out, you will never again want to be in that restroom.
Mr. Mayor, just the graphic of that, man. I'm taking a step back. Oh my God! But definitely major props on that. And so, like you, I am a product of New York City Public Schools, and we did have on Soul Lounge Prime Time your chancellor. We love him, David Banks. Talk about a great selection, Bob. What do you got to say, buddy?
Well, yeah, I mean, David Banks I think he's the foremost educator in the country, and I've thought that for years. And so when we saw him picked as chancellor for the New York City schools, we were like, okay, that's, you got a #1 draft pick there. So how
Yes.
is that going? What have been the objectives, and how do you feel you are on that mission to transform New York City schools?
Well, and I love you use the analogy #1 draft pick because anytime you try to rebuild a Team New York, you have to make sure you get marquee players that you can build the team around and the right coaches, the right farm team. All of that goes together. Think about, if I could just take a step back for a
Mm-hmm.
moment, what did we inherit in 2022? uh,
Wow.
which has been overshadowed. And I want to talk about why all of our successes have been overshadowed in a minute. But we inherited a city where we had a 40% increase in these major crimes. We
Mm.
witnessed employment and jobs availability was hurting. The independent financial experts didn't see that we were managing our city correctly. Our children were not reading and learning at the level that they ought to be. Tourism was nowhere to be found for the most part. No one wanted to get on our subway system. We were not we were not building the housing so that people could remain in the city. And as you were talking about some of the trash, our children in foster care, we're not getting the services that they need. Now go 2 years, 2 years,
Mm,
2 years later, more jobs in the city of New York than the history of the
mm,
city.
yes.
More affordable housing built in 1 year in the history of the city. More people that were formerly homeless moved into permanent housing in the history of the city. More people who needed vouchers received vouchers to go into homeless in the history of the city. Bond raters, those independent financial experts, they raised our bonds because they saw what we were doing. We saw a double-digit decrease in shooting, double-digit decrease in housing. And then when you look at Chancellor Banks, we said it is not good that 30 to 40% of our inmates at Rikers Island are dyslexic. We need to be
Mm,
catching this dyslexia ahead of
wow,
time. He put
wow.
in the first in this nation dyslexia screening for all of our children, and he changed the reading methodologies that everyone is now saying he was a visionary. The state has embraced it, and we believe the national government is going to embrace it at the same time. 62 million tourists, the fourth largest number of tourists in our city's history. When you start looking at what we've done, what we have done in 2 years, and we're outpacing the state in reading and write and math. We're ahead of the entire state in doing so because of the team we built. And what does that team look like? That's the most significant part of this. People look at me as being the second black mayor of the city of New York, number 110, but they're missing Sheena Wright, the first
Mm,
woman of color to be a
mm,
first deputy mayor. Uh,
mm,
uh, Deputy Mayor Williams Isons, the first
mm,
Trinidadian. Deputy
mm,
Mayor Mira Josie, the first East Indian.
mm,
Deputy Mayor Maria Torres Springer, the first Filipino.
mm,
Deputy Mayor Amazon, the first Dominican. Ingrid
mm,
Martin, the first African American chief advisor. You go through the list. Eddie Kaban, the first Spanish
mhm.
speaker to be the police commissioner, the first women police commissioner, the first women fire commissioner. I mean, we changed the face of the city and we put people in power that was not only diverse, but they had the abilities because of their personal narratives to turn the city around. And now you're seeing the byproduct of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And major props, Mayor, because like I said, you have actually a cabinet that looks like New York, that
Right,
looks like America, for God's sake, you know?
right.
Uh, uh, and certainly Night Watchman. Oh, I also have to say that Night Watchman and I, we do have a common thread, like I said, New York City Public School. So I'm a product of Stuyvesant High School, okay? The old building, when it was on 15th Street, right? And,
Deep, 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 deep.
yep. And Night Watchman's father attended Stuyvesant as well, so that's what we got
Wow, wow.
income. Yeah,
Is your
yes.
dad
And City College.
is your
Well,
dad
Oh,
still with us?
no. Unfortunately, he passed about 10 years
Uh-huh.
ago. But
Mm,
he is the product of that upward mobility chain of starting out at Stuyvesant, then going to City College, which is our great public institution and still is.
yes.
So that upward mobility, it works and is obviously an important part of New York's ecosystem of being able to have an educational system that creates a pathway toward uplifting yourself and your family.
Love it, love it, love it,
absolutely.
love it.
And you know what? I have to say, Mr. Mayor, one of the things, and I want you to give both an explanation. City of Yes. I want to know about small business, and I want to know
Yes.
about housing. Okay, City
I
of
love
Yes.
that. I
Uh
love
huh.
that. First, I think it's important to lay the foundation of what City of Yes is about. Do you know we have 59 community boards in our city where a lot of this housing stuff goes through for
Mm.
ULERP and all of these other technical aspects? Out of those 59 community boards, because our
I'm
city
going to ask you to
our,
stop and explain ULERP for our listeners. That's a
Yes.
little
yes.
inside baseball, so just
Yeah,
spell
right.
out what ULERP is.
Right. Well, I think the best way to explain it is that when you want to do projects of building that is not as of right, that meaning that you want to increase the scale, the size, you have to put it through the community board, the borough president, and the mayor's office through planning to determine if the project can go through. And what we have found out that out of the 59 community boards that's part of that decision making or the area of the city, because our city is broke down into community boards, and out of those 59 community boards, 9 of them have built more affordable housing than all the 50 combined.
Wow. Wow.
Hmm.
And so that has created an oversaturation of new housing in certain communities, and it has led to gentrification, overplacement, high pricing. It has just led to a different structure in our city. So what are we saying? We're saying every community should build a little more housing so we
Mm,
don't overburden other communities. Because we have communities in this city that has access to good schools, access to good health care, access to good quality food, access to good transportation, but they're not building any affordable housing. And the zoning laws have been racist. They
mm,
prevented building higher to prevent people from coming in, and we're
mm.
attacking that front and center. So when your son goes away to college and come back home, or your family member decides they want to go on their own and leaves the home, they should have a place to live. We have a
Yes.
1.4% vacancy rate where people have to
Wow.
leave the city because there's not enough apartments, and that drives up the cost. We have an inventory problem in this city.
Absolutely. And okay, so now that's the overall view in terms of, let's say, what you learned in that process may be. So, in terms of,
Yes.
let's say, tackling that and using your city of yes for affordable housing, what is your vision?
So we want to go to the community boards and say, okay, here's your parcel of geographical areas in your community. Let's build more housing that we don't change the character of the community, allow people to build higher. You may have, for example, a store where it's near the transportation, but it's only one level. We're saying let's build 2 floors on top of that to get
Mm,
more affordable housing there. You
mhm.
may have a house where you want to add a kitchen to because your loved one or your grandmother, your mom decides that, I'm getting up in age, I want to live with my loved ones. So now let's give you the ability to do that and create that housing, that extended families, because the families are extending more. So we're saying let's look in your community and see how do we remove those old zoning rules that did not allow people to do this so that we can start building to house New Yorkers within their community. And that is the goal of the city of Yes.
And Mr. May, would you say that, okay, so certainly we know that COVID has revealed, especially let's say to the real estate market, that you know what? I can actually work effectively remotely. So
Without a
seeing
doubt.
okay, so seeing that and that let's say the real estate industry has to maybe make some adjustments, might you also see this applied to certain office buildings that may be lying 80% vacant or unoccupied, using that same zoning technique to change?
Yes, and yes, and that's so important. We had some real victories up in Albany. I really want to thank the governor, the speaker, the
Mm,
majority leader, and all of those elected officials that have really stepped up. My brother, Assemblyman Gibbs, and
mm,
others. And one of the big victories that we walked away with is that we can now convert a lot of this empty office space into housing. We have about 138 million square feet of empty office spaces. There's no
wow,
reason it should
wow.
remain empty.
Hmm.
Prior to the changes in Albany, we were stuck with a too cumbersome process to convert it into housing, and now we have an opportunity to do so we can match that need.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, so now we looked at City of Yes for attacking affordable housing. Tell me about small business. How do we use that same acronym?
It's so important. You know what we're hurting in small businesses? We're hurting in the retail space. We
Mm,
have to reuse these retail spaces. And what we said is that let's look at these antiquated rules that are on the books that don't allow certain retail spaces to take place in various communities. Like they got restrictions on typewriters. Who the hell use typewriters anymore for the most part? You know? And so we're saying these rules of what you can't do, because you just pointed out accurately that many people are working from home. And so we should not have all these restrictions on doing a home-based build business, and that is what we're looking at with small businesses, because many people are moving to the place of having their own small businesses. Even when they occupy full-time work, they still are trying to transition to having their own business. And then we need to give folks access to capital. That's something that Commissioner Kim has been great at doing. Our Small Business Opportunity Fund, we have put millions of dollars into small businesses, and want to add that what my brother Michael Gardner is doing, my Chief Diversity Officer.
Mm-hmm.
We are looking at the billions of dollars we have in MWBEs and making sure that we are looking at those 1,900 certified MWBEs and give them access to some of the city business that has often eluded of these small businesses.
Uh, and you know what? You got to say, Mr. Mayor, of course, one of the best dressed men on the planet, even though, you know what, he's from Chi-Town, but we'll give him some props, Michael Garner. But but I also got to commend you in terms of your selection of the commissioner of SBS, Kevin Kim. Good dude,
Yes,
smart dude, and also responsive. Okay, so
yes,
because we're
yes.
going to actually be working together and doing some, let's say, career and job fairs in northern Manhattan. So I'm really, really excited about that. You know.
Yeah, and first Korean to hold that position just
Hmm.
shows you what diversity looks like and the benefits of having that diversity.
Absolutely. And I have to also say now, and tell me this now. Certainly, we know on the state level we have the Office of Cannabis Management, but I noticed that you have a comparable component there on the city level out of SBS. So tell me about that.
Yeah,
Well, but first of all, let's
Oh,
give you props for Dashida Dawson. You know,
yes,
again,
yes,
oh,
love her,
another
love
first
her.
round draft pick. Another first
Yes,
ah,
round
yes,
draft pick. Absolutely.
love her. Extremely talented. She knows the balance of not undermining the cannabis industry and the dreams of allowing them who were impacted because of heavy-handed enforcement. She understood you want to make sure that we regulate without harming the market. And so that was
hmm
another victory we got from Albany with the help from Assemblywoman Jennifer Rajkumar and her energy around the Smoke
mm,
Act. We started now. We have the tools to target the illegal shops that have really permeated our communities. We now have the tools to go about enforcing and moving them down, and we're excited about that. But it was so important that this market didn't get out of control, because we found people were targeting young people around vape products, around
mm.
illegal products. There's some places that they were selling everything other than cannabis, and now we
Well,
can go in and do the enforcement that we need with the sheriffs.
perfect, perfect. Night Watchman, what you got for the mayor?
So obviously the biggest thing in the headlines right now is what's going on the college campuses, and this is not an isolated thing here. It's happening all over the country, but in particular, it's happening at Columbia and at City College, our preeminent institutions. So there's obviously a balance between the right to peaceably assemble, and there's a line where you cross. So tell us a little bit about your interactions with those institutions, and how do you balance those rights, the right to assemble and protest versus going beyond that and property damage and potential violence.
It's so important, and I think that's the uniqueness of my role now as the mayor of the city, the totality of my life, and just the diversity of it. Because I protested, and I don't know if there's too many
Mm.
mayors that have ever protested. I protested for dismantling of apartheid. I
Yes,
protested
yes.
when hospitals were being threatened to close. I protested after of those questionable police shootings from Amadou Diallo to
Mm,
Zongo.
mm.
I have protested not only as a civilian, but I have taken off my uniform at the end of my tour and joined protests. And I've
Wow.
also
Wow.
I've also protected protesters,
Hmm.
and it's important that that is what democracy is about, is the right to protest. And I encourage people to use peaceful protest to raise their voices, but you can't cross the line. You
Mm-hmm.
cannot go from protest to destruction. And what we saw playing out at the Columbia, and what we started to see of destruction of property, of doing things that I found to be hateful in nature. You don't call for peace
Mm-hmm.
and then call for the destructions of individuals. I think that there's some legitimate concerns on both sides of this issue. It needs to be resolved. Is it going to be resolved through Mayor Adams? I doubt it very much. But
Mm.
I need to create the safe environment that people can protest without the destruction of property and harming individuals. And we're seeing some of that play out throughout the entire country. But we wanted to make sure here in the city that if our colleges called us and asked for our assistance due to what they saw on their grounds, we would be there and provide them the necessary assistance. Now, here's my concern. I said this at the beginning. Something was strange about this protest. Some of these protests that were taking place, and I was really concerned about that. And it wasn't until I asked my intelligence division to do an analysis and say, do we have outside agitators embedded into the call that these students are participating in? And
Mm.
to my dismay, we found that we did.
Mm-hmm.
One of them, her husband was arrested for federal charges, terrorism charges,
Whoa.
because of her actions. They were professionals. They participated in training. They participated in the takeover of the Hamilton Hall on
Wow.
Columbia.
Mm.
And we found that 40%, over 40%, close to 48%, almost 50, I should say, were not part of the student population.
Wow. Wow. Agitators. Mm-hmm.
Right. And so,
Gotcha.
in organic movement from students, we should all welcome that, because
Yeah.
the dismantling of apartheid happened
Yeah.
because of what we did here in this country and internationally. So change is protest. Change is
Mhm.
not remaining silent. But we hurt our movement when we use violence to call on that change.
Yes, absolutely. And Mr. Mayor, so I know some people will say, nah, nah, nah. But I'm going to say thank you for absolutely successfully, let's say, mitigating what was happening on Columbia without any violence. Okay. Okay. There was no, as they say, because you and I are of a certain age, so we certainly do remember Kent State.
Well, thank you, brother. And not only Penn State. Keep in mind,
Mm,
when I looked at what happened on the same day that they went in to resolve the Columbia issue, they had to go to CUNY,
mm-hmm,
and at that scene, because I use drones to watch what's happening on the ground. I
mm-hmm,
use other video because I want to make sure these officers are acting properly. But the same day that they went to Columbia, there was a fierce action and activity that was happening at CUNY. Bottles were being thrown, garbage containers were being thrown, other objects was being thrown. There was a high level of discipline that
mm-hmm.
I told my commanders we cannot succumb to that type of activity, because you and I both know what happens when there are major disruptions in our country. Our communities burned down. We know
Yes.
what it's like to have Brownsville burned down, Harlem burned
Mm,
down, South
mm-hmm,
Bronx burned down, South Jamaica Queens burned down, along Jamaica Avenue. We know what happens when there are these major disruptions. We're just starting to build back our communities that were the victims of some of these protests. We know what happened in Detroit. We know what happened in Chicago. And so we can't afford to have major violent disruptions in our cities because we are impacted by them.
absolutely. And Mr. Mayor, I definitely want to also say and whatnot that unlike other mayors from the past, you have a background in history in law enforcement. Okay.
Yes,
And including, of course, starting a 100 Blacks in law enforcement who care.
yes,
Would
yes.
you
And
would you say that as mayor that your relationship with, let's say, the PBA is one that's maybe better than it has been in the past?
no, without a doubt, in all the unions, I'm the mayor of the city, and
Mm-hmm.
I have to negotiate with unions around contracts, around services. So you don't dismantle your advocacy on who you were and what made you. Because I'm still the same cat, but you have to add to your abilities because you're the mayor of the city, and the mayor of the city means that I have to be in a room with the entire constituency. That's why I spent many years in my Sikh community, my Buddhist community, my Muslim
Mm-hmm.
community, my Christian community. That's why I
Wow.
speak to all of my union members because that's the role of the mayor of the most important city on the globe. No one argues about the status of New York. We are the most important city on the globe. And when
Yeah.
we get it right, the country gets it right and the globe gets it right. And so, relationship with the unions, the police unions, the COBRA, the correction officers unions,
Mm-hmm.
my probation, all of these law enforcement officers, I'm going to make sure the officers do their jobs professionally, but I have to foster that they're going to trust that I'm going to give them the tools they need to do their job.
Absolutely. And yeah.
So,
Go ahead, Night Watchman.
well, I wanted to ask you. You started at the top of the broadcast. You mentioned that there are many opinions and many agendas you have to deal with, and you had to prioritize. So, I wanted to ask you, what are your priorities? What are the top three biggest challenges you feel the city is facing right now?
The migrants and asylum seekers,
Wow.
191,000
Yes.
came into our
Yes.
city. Many people equated their arrivals and the actions. They equated it to, well, this is what the mayor did to us. The mayor's giving migrants and asylum seekers more than what they're giving everyday longstanding New Yorkers. He's giving them American Express cards to go and buy Gucci bags. I mean, the narrative was just out of control. And there are 4 points to it that people need to realize. Number one, it's against the law for me to stop the buses from coming into the city of New York. I can't do that. It's
Wow.
against the
Wow.
law.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, it's against the law for me not to give them 3 meals a day and a place to stay. I would be breaking the law if I did that. It's against the law for me to allow them to work. I
Mm-hmm.
cannot even allow the overwhelming number of them to volunteer and give them a stipend. So if they want to come
Wow.
and say, we want to clean the streets, remove graffiti, and do services for the city, and just give us a stipend, the federal government said you'll be breaking federal law, Eric, if you do so.
Damn.
With that, it came with a $4 billion price tag. We only got about 180 something million out of that 4 billion from the federal government. And so Governor
Wow.
Hochul has been a partner, but we need more help from the federal government. And lastly, we need to allow people to work. If you parole people into the country, you should say that you have the ability to work. We have a shortage of all these jobs, everything from lifeguards to food service workers. You name the job, and we have a shortage. Let's let people work. And we're dealing with population decreases in other parts of the country. Many of my mayors and governors are saying, Eric, we will take some of the migrants and asylum seekers because we have a population problem. But they got to be able to work. We don't want to take and have them just sit around all day. But so that is one of the top challenges. The second is that we have to really deal with our housing crises. And that
Mm.
came to the city
Mm-hmm.
of Yes, a conversation that you were
Mm-hmm.
talking about. That's extremely important. And
Mm-hmm.
lastly, we must make sure that we're proactive in allowing our children to develop their full personhood by giving them the tools they need so they can be productive citizens. That is the best anti-violence, the best anti-poverty. That's the best mental health issues. You give these young people the tools they need, they will be on the pathway to success and not on the pathway of destruction.
Absolutely.
Now,
And
you
go ahead.
also mentioned your relationship with the governor, and Curtis and I were talking before the broadcast, and we contrasted the last mayor and the last governor, and how that was a strained relationship that I personally think it hurt New Yorkers in many respects, especially when the pandemic hit. So tell us a little bit about how you've avoided that problem and have not only it seems to be a good working relationship with the governor, but obviously you have a good working relationship with the legislators having come from that arena. So tell us a
Yep.
little bit about how those bridges are formed and how that helps impact the results for our city.
And that's a great observation. And you're right. Governor Hochul has been a real partner for me on so many fronts. No one thought she would be able to get the mayoral accountability extension for Chancellor Banks in the budget. We were able to do that. We were able to get cannabis enforcement. We were able to get housing, and we had to raise our debt ceiling to go after some of these major projects that we have to do. She pushed that through, and so many other areas. She has been amazing. And it was about a conversation. It was about respecting her role as the chief executive of the state, and she respected the role that I have as the chief executive of the city. And it was many of my visits up in Albany, sitting down with Speaker Hasty, who stated he represents the city of New York, and he was not going to allow anything to happen that will be detrimental to the city. And Majority Leader Andrew Stewart Cousin heard from her members that how important these issues were to New York City residents. Everyone knows what we went through with in 22 with the migrants and asylum seekers. They know how devastating it has been to our city, and they said, "Let us help alleviate some of the other areas. If we can't stop the flow, we can at least help to give you access to other resources."
Yes, yes. And Mr. Mayor, I do remember that this president who we had, I think he was 45, that he did not believe in the climate change. He thought it was a Chinese hoax of some sort. I do understand that you have a division set up to really mitigate and really address that. So tell me about that, what you're doing on that front with
Yeah,
resiliency.
yes. Let me tell you something. If anyone believes climate change is not real, all you have to do is just go Google the UAE and the rain
Mm.
that they receive. Those visuals are unreal. And so we are really focused on approaching climate change through several different layers: education, legislation, and employment,
Mhm.
because this is a green economy, something that many of us sort of shy away from, is going to produce millions of jobs, billions of dollars of economic stimulus. And we want to make sure our young people are ready and trained, everything from battery installation, solar installation, electric vehicles, how to design, how to repair them. So we're really leaning into the employment aspect of this, because there's some great opportunities. Even our brothers and sisters who are incarcerated, you
Mm.
don't you don't have to do time. You can use time to learn a skill that won't put you back on that revolving door of learning the skills you need when you get out. These are jobs for the future. Second, we're the first city in America to have a what's called climate budgeting. We're looking at every
Mm.
aspect of when we make these budgetary decisions, how does it impact our climate, and how do we do a better job to make sure that we address the climate issues that we're facing. We have been very successful. We're building out an entire new college on Governor's Island with the partnership, thanks for the help from Mayor Bloomberg and others, but a real help in really teaching these environmental issues and doing the necessary research. And the education also include what we're doing with our children, how we really educate them the importance of taking care of our environment. I like to say we have two mothers. One gave birth to us, the other sustains us, and we have to make
Hmm.
sure we take care of the one that is sustaining us.
Absolutely, and I definitely have to then say, Mr. Mayor, because I think you brought it up before in terms of, let's say, public safety. We certainly do know that this is still, and correct me if I'm wrong, still the safest big city in the U.S., bar none. Uh, but we still have to do a little bit more in terms of, let's say, going to the source of mental illness, because they're out there, they're doing it.
And and that is what I was saying. As successful as we have been in this city, despite all that we've come up with, we've had a lot of level of success. But there are three issues that's overshadows our success. One of them is dealing with the recidivism problem we have. When you look at Officer Dillard and many victims of violence in our community,
Yes, yes.
you find that these are the same small number of people. The person who shot Officer Dillard, Jonathan Dillard, he was arrested 20 times before. The person
Wow.
who was
Wow.
in the car with him was arrested in April of 23 on a gun charge. He was carrying an illegal gun. There was another gun found in the car. We believe it was his. We're going to prove it through DNA. But
Mm-hmm.
these random acts of violence, do you know only 542 people who are arrested for shoplifting? They have been arrested over 7,600 times in our city. Uh,
Wow.
and even on the transit system, the 38 people who attacked transit employees have been arrested over 1,100 times. So it's about recidivism. We have to address that. The second is random acts of violence.
Wow.
You know, when you
Yes.
punch a woman in the face, no matter how safe the city is, if that gets reported, people tend to be shaken and it impacts their confidence in their city. So these random acts of violence are having a real impact on how people feel. The numbers will be low, but people don't feel safe with these random acts of violence. And the last issue in the trilogy is what you just stated, severe mental health problems.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
if we don't address that, and we have not really fixed what we did years ago, there was a real push by advocates to close psychiatric wards. When
Yes.
they closed those wards, they moved people to the streets. There was no real support system in place. And you see those with severe mental health issues are now living on our streets. They were living in our subways. And we've turned the the Rikers Island has now become the modern day psychiatric ward. Brothers, do you know 70% of the inmates on Rikers Island have mental health issues?
No, I did not know that.
70,
Wow.
70.
Mm-hmm.
And
Incredible.
so everybody's talking about closing Rikers Island, the building. We should be closing the pipeline that feeds the building.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that should be our focus. We don't have a state of the art psychiatric facility. Oftentimes in government, there's a knee jerk reaction. Something is done bad, we go to the far extreme. We need to develop a state of the art psychiatric ward where you can put people who need the care. A lot of family members call and say, my son, my dad, my husband, my daughter needs help. We need to be able to give them the help that they need. And the way we can do it is to have a psychiatric facility that we all can be proud of.
Yes, yes, indeed. And Mr. Mayor, I definitely, like I said, we talked about your relationship with the police, PBA, and the police in general. And I also want to commend you on your selection of Edward Kaban. I mean, he came up to a reception when he was first hired to Harlem, and you just feel that there is something special about him. So I just want to say, would you say that he's a police officer's police officer?
Yes, he is, and he's a people police officer.
Yes.
People they underestimate his depth and respect that he receives throughout the entire city. You could go in any community you want, and you will see the love that he receives. He's authentic,
Mm-hmm.
and that's really what our team is. Our team is made up of authentic, caring people, and he really personifies that. I just I enjoy his company. I enjoy how he connects with people, and
Mm-hmm.
he's unafraid to have that type of connection.
And would you say that since you've been in office, that let's say our numbers on uniform services have gone up, stayed the same, reduced? Tell me.
Well, there's a real fear because historically we've had large police classes that are reaching the 20-year mark,
Mm,
and there's a fear that if we don't keep pace, we can lose that. And not only are we
wow.
looking at it in the police ranks, but we're looking at all of the public safety institutions. We're
Mm,
having a
hmm.
problem with district attorneys. A lot of district
Wow.
attorneys we're losing because of the overwhelming paperwork that has been attached to their jobs. We're losing probation officers. We had code red on correction officers.
Damn.
Many of them are
Mm,
about to retire. We have to find ways to bring in or retain. we're losing school safety officers. The numbers are very low, and so when you look at the classes that's coming in, we're gonna put in new classes. We've allocated money for that, but we're having a problem filling the last class because we don't have enough qualified candidates to do so. So we found ways to take the barriers out of the way, but we need to make sure we fortify our public safety institutions so we can continue to be the safest big city in America.
Absolutely. Uh,
Yeah, I want to ask you a question about congestion pricing, which was
Mhm.
an idea that was started by Mayor Bloomberg, and I thought it left with him, but evidently it's come back and it's due to be implemented. So
Yes.
I guess my question is, what are the real benefits of it, and are there unanticipated issues or problems we might run into when it gets implemented?
Yes, and the first order of business that people must understand that congestion pricing is not controlled by the city of New York.
right. Hmm.
The state made a determination that it
Hmm.
was going to be it was going to be implemented. The state turned it over to the MTA for the most part to do how the implementation is going to be done, and the federal government added their authorization as well. I would have hoped that this is impacting our city streets, so I would have hoped that the city of New York and the city council and the mayor's office would have formalized the entire plan to do so. We didn't get a chance to do that, but we were able to fight for some real recovery, like $100 million to go to areas outside the congestion pricing zone to get some relief. We were able to look at shift workers, low wage workers. We were able to look at some city employees. So there were some things we were able to get, but I think that it should have been up to the city to make this determination. Now, what are the benefits? We have a real congestion problem, particularly in our
Mm.
central business district that has an economic price tag attached to it and sending traffic for a long period of times. The emissions is they are definitely impacting the not only the central business district but the environmental area. And when you look at Manhattan, Manhattan has some of the best transportation going in the
Yep.
country.
Yep. It's true.
You know, crosstown buses, crosstown trains, north and south trains. I'm going all the way across from one avenue to the next. And so, if there was ever a place that we should say people should be using public transportation, that is probably one of the places to do it. And we need to make sure that the money that is generated is predicted to be $1 billion a year. We need to make sure that money goes into a lockbox and just go to improving our transportation system.
Nice. Nice. Yeah. And I mean,
So we won't blame you if it messes up.
Right. Brothers, I gotta go see. I gotta go see Jackie Rose. She's upstairs, but
oh,
but this is not a one and done. We would
yes.
look forward to just check in. It doesn't have to be long, but we love to check in each month and let
Yes.
you know some of the updates that we're doing to keep the Harlem community aware of what's happening.
So, Mr. Mayor, so you're telling me that you're coming back to the cookout? Is that what you're
Yes,
saying?
yes, we are. We're gonna make it a
Okay,
regular. We're gonna make it a
I got
regular, so I can
one
make
final
sure.
question for you before
Go,
you go.
Yes.
go ahead.
So in doing our little research, I didn't know that you had written a book about healthy eating. And tell us
Yes.
a
Ooh.
little bit about that journey and how that's impacted you, and how does that impact your outlook on the city and healthy eating.
No, well said, and we should probably do a whole show just on that. I
Okay.
was hit. I was hit with a healthcare crisis,
Mm,
and little did I know my eating habits they were feeding my healthcare crisis. And I think it's important that many of us don't know how closely food is attached. The doctors told me that my late stage diabetes was attached to my dinner,
oh,
and little did
wow.
I know it was not attached to my dinner. It was attached to. I mean, they said it was attached to my DNA. Little did
Mm,
I know it wasn't my DNA. It was my dinner. And when I
wow.
changed my eating habits, I was able to reverse my vision loss, my nerve damage. I had an ulcer. That ulcer went away as well.
Ooh,
My blood
wow.
pressure, my cholesterol, all
Wow.
normalized. And so I
Nice.
shared that journey in the book, and I shared the journey of how our eating habits came about. So it's a light reading, very entertaining, very informative, and it's very helpful to help people empower themselves by looking at food differently in our relationship with food.
You're perfect. Mr. Mayor, thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Please say hello to Jackie Rhodes. Tell him Curtis said hello. Okay.
Yes.
And Night Watchman, take us home.
You've been listening to Soul Lounge Prime Time on WHCR 90.3 FM, the Voice of Harlem, also live streaming on YouTube and Facebook. You can always find us on Monday nights with the most interesting guests. And certainly today, we had a good
Yes.
one.
Yes, indeed. Mr. Mayor, take care, my brother. Oh, he's out. All right. Night Watchman, see you later, buddy.
All right now.
Bye.